Most of the Zionist leadership knew about the Jewish origin of most Palestinians. Of course, Arthur Ruppin, who was responsible for the settlement, what we call settlements today. He said at a conference that took place in Vienna, a Zionist conference, but most of the participants were from Europe and wanted. They said the solution was to expel them, to kick them out of Europe. He said, in no way are they part of the people of Israel. And Ben-Gurion said, this is the way to a future solution for the problem of the land of Israel.
Hello to you, our dear viewers. It sounds like a science fiction movie. An Israeli computer scientist and entrepreneur, one of the pioneers of the Israeli software industry, who set himself the goal of researching the shared Hebrew roots of Jews and Palestinians since the beginning of the 21st century. And he also claims that he can prove that our bitterest enemies are actually Jews who converted to Islam.
Yes.
So you know, such a thing does exist. He's here me in the studio, a fascinating man.
Thank you.
Tzvi Misinai, whom I already told before that I've been waiting a long time for this interview, which challenges the existing national identities, both Jewish and Palestinian, and seeks out a hidden identity component, a concealed Jewishness. Am I saying the right things? The people of Israel. Is this a historical provocation or a revolutionary vision of reconciliation, one that gives us hope for a different kind of relationship with our bitterest enemies, the Palestinians, because it's something we haven't considered before? Hello, Tzvi Misinai.
Good afternoon.
It's a pleasure to have you in the studio.
Thank you.
Explain it to us.
Okay. We can talk about a lot of things, but the main thing is that we need to understand that most of us, first of all, the Jews, or almost all Jews, and most Palestinians, have fallen into the trap set by the con artist, maybe the biggest in history. Haj Amin al-Husseini, who also caused the conflict, he caused it. He didn't carry it out himself. Bibi assigned him responsibility for the Holocaust. He was the one who caused the decision for the Holocaust. He caused the War of Independence, which led to the Nakba, and also to the invasion of the Arab armies. And there was always a need to restore honor, and the entire chain of wars, all of it happened because of him. In the 1920s, meaning 100 years ago in the 20th century, most of the Zionist leadership still knew about the Jewish origin of most Palestinians.
Really?
Yes. First of all, Belkind, even at the end of the 19th century, was in a place in Jordan. He was an agronomist. The Ottomans sent him to Wadi Sirhan. He found a Bedouin tribe there, and there were Jews among them. Then he started searching and found more. And he talked and talked and talked, to a wall, of course. But not everyone was a wall. And then, later on, Ben-Tzvi and Ben-Gurion also dealt with this, gave a lot of talks, and there's a lot more that could be detailed, but they knew. And Ben-Gurion said, this is the way, this is the path to a future solution for the land of Israel problem. As early as 1936, Ben-Gurion said that not a single clod of the land of Israel should be given up. He meant primarily the western part, because the eastern part, even before that, was somehow already out of the picture, which is less important for the past and more important for the future. There are two banks to the Jordan. You can achieve that if you want, but these things were known. Even Martin Buber, even later on, said that if you look at the Christians in the Galilee, you will find the purest Jewish blood on earth. Arthur Ruppin, who was responsible for settlement, what we call settlement today, he said at a Zionist conference in Vienna, but most of them were from Europe and wanted. They said the solution was to drag them out, to kick them out of here. He said, under no circumstances are they part of the people of Israel. Okay, but that's just a drop in the ocean. Ben-Tzvi and Ben-Gurion worked on this a lot. In 1917, they wrote a book where this is mentioned in the Yiddish edition, but when it was translated into Hebrew, they apparently left it out. It was probably too uncomfortable. But even before that, around 1840, there was a British survey delegation here on behalf of Queen Victoria, and meaning she was one of the donors and initiators of this survey. And there was someone there who was first a major, later Colonel Condor, who talked about this, and not just him, but also the British consul in the land of Israel. His wife was Polish, the daughter of a Polish priest who knew Hebrew and Arabic, and she also spoke about it. And they found that the villagers around Jerusalem, where this consul went, these villagers, they don't know who their neighbors are, but they do know that there were 6 cities of refuge. A story. Did Westerners know about this? Okay, so what happened? It all started in 12, when a decree was issued here that anyone who didn't convert to Islam had to leave the land. Until then, most people were Christians. The Fatimids were accused of being descendants of Jews, because the founder of the Fatimid dynasty was a Jewish orphan who was taken in and adopted by a family, and from there the Fatimid dynasty emerged. So the Abbasids accused them of being Jews, and then, wanting to prove they weren't, they burned the Jewish quarter in Cairo and issued the decree of Al-Hakim, which said, anyone who does not convert to Islam must leave the land of Israel. And most of the foreign Christians who were from the Roman army that stayed here, the Byzantine army that remained here, left the country. A few remained, and today they are less than 8%, with more of them east of the Jordan. And at that time, the people of Israel who stayed here after the Bar Kokhba revolt and became a minority after the rebellion, once again became the vast majority here in the land. But for the Christians, it was easy to escape in order to stay here. There were other places that would take them in, but for the Jews, where could they escape to? And they were utterly destitute. So they pretended, they put on an act. They pretended to convert to Islam outwardly. It's easy. It's just one sentence, La ilaha illallah. They didn't pay the head tax. It was easier for them, but at home they continued practicing Judaism. And that's how it was. There were a lot of ups and downs in all sorts of directions, which we can skip over for now. In the end, around 1885, the Ottomans conducted a survey here. And why? Because that's when the first Aliyah began, and they knew that the Fellahin were aware of their Jewish origins. They also weren't. Someone in the villages checked how Muslim they really were, and at first, no one really cared. But as soon as the first Aliyah began, there was a fear that a connection would form based on national identity. Before that, because Disraeli saved them from the Russians in Istanbul, they gave Egypt and Cyprus to the English as a gift. I'm not 100% sure about that right now, but it's not important. And then they were afraid that the British would also be asked to give the land of Israel to the Jewish people. In 1841, there was a consul from the Churchill family in Damascus who told Montefiore, demand the land of Israel from the Ottomans. Why are you, the famous Jews, the glassmakers of this Churchill and the famous Churchill, part of them? They are also descendants of Israel. We can elaborate on that. But that's not the topic right now. So they told Montefiore, but he didn't know how to do it. So he established the famous flour mill with the carriage and so on, and helped the Jews.
That was easier.
It was more practical. But what happened during the Ottoman rule was that the Al-Husseini family, which today is a clan, became established. They were originally Jews who returned from Sudan. How did they come from Sudan? That's another story.
Al-Husseini?
Yes.
The Hashishibi were Jews too, right?
Both, actually. The Husseinis came. They were black. They came from Sudan. They lived in a village near Jerusalem called Al-Sudan, and people called them Al-Sawada, the blacks. They married local women, and gradually, The skin color of some of their descendants changed. Then they came to Fakhm, and when it was time to collect taxes, they told him, "We'll collect the taxes for you. We'll bring you the money in advance. Just give us a discount. You don't need to deal with it, and we'll collect it later." That's how they. And now, what did they tell him? "We are descendants of the Prophet. We are descendants of Hussein Ali." Why would he care to investigate? Whether he believed them or not, he wanted the money and just wanted to move on. They collected the money, paid in advance. When there was a year of good news and they had to receive, they collected then too. When there were several consecutive years of good news, the poor fellahin, whose blood had been sucked dry, couldn't pay anymore, so their land was confiscated, and then the land was rented back to them, and they also took from them they were considered Muslims. They took from them the carriage, which is 20%. What is 20%? The real Arabs have happiness, which is 10%. All those who converted to Islam, they called them, were given carriage, 20%. They're considered less good, so they pay more tax. Here in this country, there was never Asher, because the only ones, or almost the only ones, were the descendants of the Caliph's army, a floating situation, who from the start were given a salary without being taxed. And there was more than one tax from Tzvi and Dam, which existed even before the Arab conquest, and that's all the Arabs who inherited. In short, the moment they took over the land, the Zionists came. And during the Ottoman period, they took from the fellahin, from the elders, both the income from the land and the taxes. Then the Zionists came and gave them work. They no longer had to pay for the land. So everyone came. They just wanted to come and be Jews. And then, after the war, World War I, more children came. The Balfour Declaration. Balfour was also an evangelist of Israelite descent, but that's a separate topic. And then the fellahin saw. They sold swamplands only to Jews. Malaria, all those stories. That too is a lot of stories. But more and more workers came, and they were left without a steady income. They got a one-time payment for the land and were left without land, without a steady income. And then in 1920, the Mufti wasn't the Mufti yet. Haj Amin al-Husseini. He started the first riots, mainly in Jerusalem, but not only there. In 1921, there were more riots, which weren't related to the Mufti, but were connected to the communists. We won't get into it, but mainly in Jaffa, that's when Chaim Brenner was murdered. But then, as a result, a fact-finding delegation came, a delegation on behalf of Churchill, the Secretary of the Colonies. And whom did they ask? The British. The British weren't used to this kind of corruption. So whom did they ask? The Effendis, the landowners. Some of the Effendis weren't even landowners, just respected figures. They asked them. So they told them, Zionism is ruining the livelihood of the fellahin, the poor people. The British didn't realize that everyone here was such a fraud. They believed them, and then came the first white paper. They took Transjordan out of the land of Israel, and even here they limited immigration. Even Churchill himself was involved in this, even though he was a big supporter of Zionism. Now, but as soon as the first Aliyah started coming and they were afraid the British would want the land, even the land of Israel, I'm talking about around 1878. So then, the Ottomans got scared and started persecuting the impostors. They told them, you have to stop deceiving people. And then, for example, Tamimi at that time became Tamimi. What is Tamimi? In Hebrew it means innocent, but in Arabic it means solid or firm. Why? All those fellahin who were asked who they were, so that it would fit, said they were Arabs to fit in, just like Rinaldi, who came and told his story. They said they were Jews. In any case, there weren't many people back then, and they were told to stop deceiving. And to the Kadib family, who received the name Kadib, they asked, "What does Kadib mean?" Distributor. You will spread the word that people need to convert to Islam. But from the Kadib family, I heard not only about the matter of separating halal, but also about why people perform protection rituals against demons. And that's how they were forced to distance themselves from Judaism, but they secretly kept a lot of the traditions. In the first segment that was done for us by a respected leftist, Nissim Asik, back then there was only Channel 1. Today it's Channel 11. They showed a 14-year-old Bedouin girl from the Sawarka tribe east of Hebron, and she tells how they used to light candles in the evening, Friday night, meaning the eve of Friday, the eve of Shabbat. There are no candles in Islam. They sent inspectors to see who was cheating. The Ottomans did. So just to be safe, they lit candles on Thursday night, the eve of Friday. If the inspector didn't come, they also lit candles on Friday night, the eve of Shabbat. Wonderful. And that woman, we saw her throw part of the dough into the tabun as the halal portion. The Ottomans, to figure out who they needed to keep an eye on and who they needed to make sure wasn't cheating, they did a survey around 1825, and 80% of the residents on both sides of the Jordan said they were of Jewish origin. And for those on the west side of the Jordan, add another 10% who were Samaritans. That's how you get to 90%. But why isn't this published anywhere? Only in Tzvi's book. There are a lot of leftists who worked on this before Sadat was assassinated. The Jordanian and Egyptian notebooks in the Mossad have this information. King Hussein wrote a letter to Sadat a week before he was assassinated, and there still wasn't peace with Jordan. If we really want peace, we have to publish the origins of the Palestinians. That's regarding the data about identity. Regarding nationality.
Wait, why didn't Ben-Gurion publish it? Ben-Gurion wrote.
He didn't publish 1917.
Did he include these things in his writings?
No. I don't know.
Why?
There was one book with Ben Tzvi, which they wrote together and mentioned this issue. Ben Tzvi wrote much more. There's a book called The Inhabitants of Our Land where it's written, and not only that, we saw in the Ben Tzvi library pencil notes by Ben Tzvi for the next edition. But then the events of 36 to 39 broke out, because the Mufti didn't want immigration to come. Hitler made the transfer agreement in 33 with the head of the Jewish agency. The name will come to me in a second. And they made an agreement to bring 60,000 Jews to the country. Yes, Hitler. After the events of 1929, people thought that was the end of Zionism. The one who saved Zionism was Hitler. With that agreement, Arlosorov, meanwhile, was murdered for a different reason. And then they continued the agreement for 60,000. After 50,000 had already come, the riots broke out and the British started to impose restrictions.
The Nazis allowed Jews to come to the land of Israel, 50,000 of them.
The agreement was for 60, and by the time of the 1936 riots, 50,000 had already arrived. Now, that's not all. Hitler, through Heydrich, sent Eichmann to the land of Israel to meet with the Mufti. The left told the British, don't let him in. So in the end, they met in Cairo with representatives of the Mufti, because the Mufti was under house arrest in Jerusalem due to his involvement in the riots. This was in October 1937. And Eichmann told them, stop the riots, because the British haven't allowed enough Jewish immigration, and let us send the Jews to the land. At first, Germany, but they knew they were going to conquer all of Europe. That's what they thought. So they asked him, why are we doing these riots? So there wouldn't be immigration here? And he didn't agree. So Hitler was left with no choice, and he said, no other country wanted the Jews, so then they said, I have to go to extermination.
There was Madagascar.
After 1940, after they conquered France, they said, we'll transfer the Jews to Madagascar. And Himmler said then, we are a civilized people. We will not be murdered like Stalin murdered millions. We'll transfer them to Madagascar. They sent.
So they'd die on their own.
I don't know. That wasn't the intention. It was just an option. So, they sent Eichmann to the Jews of Warsaw to get their support for this, and then they told him only to the land of Israel. Well, nothing came of it. After they lost the Battle of Britain, yes, and realized they wouldn't defeat the British, then they were already planning Barbarossa to attack the Russians. Eichmann said it was in October 40-41. Eichmann sent over here 3 ships with more than 3,000 immigrants from Poland and Romania to see if maybe the British would allow it and there would be no need for extermination. This was before the extermination began, before Barbarossa, which is when the extermination started, and the British deported them, so they said there was no choice. So what the Mufti did was, first of all, he was responsible for the decision about the Holocaust. The fact that Hitler carried it out is, of course, much more significant. His part in the execution was small, in Yugoslavia. After the war, he was declared a war criminal. In the end, somehow, they smuggled him to Cairo, and when the British were about to leave, the November decision about a Jewish state, about the partition, King Farouk considered whether to go to war as soon as that happened. His officers told him, we will lose because the Jews are determined after what happened to them. But the Mufti, who was then in Egypt, convinced Al-Banna, his friend, the founder and at that time the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood, to organize demonstrations that would persuade the king to go to war. And that's how the War of Independence started later on. Now, let's go back to your question. I just wanted to finish. What did that scoundrel do? And anyone who was with the Jews, he persecuted them. There was someone named Abd al-Qadir, Mazarib, who later became Amos Yarkoni, who was the commander of the reconnaissance unit, his name. And they told him back in 36 to attack the Jews, but he didn't want to, as he was raised. And then they put him in a pit, in a well, preparing for a trial. He managed to escape and help the Jews. Later on, he helped establish the minorities unit, which included the Harov reconnaissance unit and others. And someone else from Mazarib, who told me about this even earlier, was the father of the Air Force Commander Norkin, may his father's memory be blessed, who was a sheikh from Mazarib, very wealthy, with a lot of land. He gave land for free, to Nahawal and other nearby settlements, because he wanted the Jews to come, and to this day they fight alongside us, because they're Bedouins, together with us. And I have a good friend who was wounded in the war. What trouble he got because of that.
So, try to sum it all up.
To answer your question, first of all, we have a lot of people. What do they need? The Palestinian Authority is a mafia that also causes disasters. Hamas did a second Nakba to them. Who needs all this? The main problem is that the truth has been hidden from both us and them. So we need to stop being victims of these lies, to get to the truth, because only the truth will bring an end to this cursed conflict, which is all based on deception. We all fell into the trap. We need to get out of this trap already, otherwise we're heading toward fear.
Dear from Sinai, it's a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks.
A fascinating story that not many people know about. Thank you for coming to the studio. That's the Hebrew version, and next to it is the Arabic version.
The moment they know how to lie well when it suits them. But when you talk about their origins, that's one of the most important things, the most important, and they're the proudest of it. Once they see this, who needs all this trouble? Look at us. We already know what to do. All we do is kill each other in theory, and look at the heights of self-hatred we've reached. Now everyone, a lot of people hate the Palestinians. No, not today, because of what happened. Don't people understand that everyone is a victim of this lie? Including Ismail Haniyeh, whose Jewish roots I know about, and Yahya Sinwar, and Musa Abu Marzouk, and the head of parliament, Dr. Aziz Dweik. I know about the Jewish heritage of all the senior Hamas officials. It's the same thing in Fatah. A man, a Bedouin officer, went to Abu Mazen with my book. He said, "Someone else has already come to me with this book. Why don't you want it?" Abu Mazen is a descendant of a family of rabbis who came here around 650 from Salamanca. Rabbi Moshe Alwaz and his brother, Rabbi Abraham Alwaz, moved to become the heads of the community in Alexandria. Why don't you want it? Because all of them, not just Hamas, would want to kill me. All those around me, who every year launder about $2 billion, would know that this would be the end of the party. They would kill me too.